Welcome back, my friends, and welcome to the final chapter of The Unseen Winter. Do you hear what I hear in the quiet of winter? Tonight, the angel who forgot his own name.
Winter had come late that year, not in one grand arrival, but in fits and starts, held back by unanswered wishes, broken rituals, grief loops, and memories that refused to settle where they belonged. By the time December deepened, the valley had started to correct itself. Mara had released a wish that kept snow from falling. Nina had listened to a humming house remember. Rowan had let the day she lost her son become a day that could finally end. Lena had stepped into Winter's ribcage and helped it breathe again. The season was no longer stuck, but it was tired. Like a singer who'd finally found the right note and needed to rest. In the town of Winter's Edge, Bellwether Church was the first building to sense the change. Its old rafters ached with the pressure. Its stained glass windows trembled at odd hours, as if something unseen brushed against them from the other side. The bells, when they rang, sounded just slightly off, one fraction of a tone too hollow. Something was coming, or rather something had already arrived and was trying to remember how.
It began appropriately enough with music. The church choir had gathered for a late rehearsal a week before Christmas. Outside, snowflakes drifted in hesitant clusters, the sky undecided between flurries and fog. Inside, the air smelled of candle wax and old wood polish. Voices rose, imperfect but earnest, in a carol about peace on earth and mercy mild. Words they'd sung so often they no longer thought about the meaning of them. At the very back pew, a man sat alone, hands folded too carefully in his lap. He wasn't wearing a coat, no hat, no gloves, only a simple shirt and worn-out trousers that should have left him shivering. But he wasn't. He watched the choir as if they were the first beauty he'd ever seen in a long time. When the final note of the song faded, the choir director lowered her arms and sighed, satisfied enough. The man in the back leaned forward, fingers trembling. Again.
The words slipped out of him like a plea. He didn't realize that he'd spoken aloud. A few choir members turned, surprised to see anyone else there. The director frowned slightly. "Rehearsal's over for tonight, sir. Christmas Eve service is next week. You're welcome to come back then."
The man blinked slowly, as if the concept of next week sat strangely in his mind. He nodded, stood up with exaggerated care, and walked down the aisle, head tipped back for a single moment to study the ceiling. The beams, the faint cracks, the way sound still clung in the air. Then he stepped outside into the uncertain snow. No one remembered seeing him come in, but they remembered how the last note of the carol had felt, like something pressing a hand gently against the inside of their ribs.
The man moved through Winter's Edge the way snow does when it first begins, quietly, unnoticed at first, leaving subtle traces in his wake. At a corner near the grocery, two men squared off in the kind of argument that starts about parking and ends with old resentments dragged into the light. Voices rose, shoulders tensed. Someone muttered about calling the police. The stranger stopped a few yards away, watching them with an expression that was not judgment, not amusement, simply attention. He took one step closer. The air around them cooled, just enough to make their breath visible. For a moment, both men saw themselves reflected in each other's anger. Two tired humans yelling because it was easier than admitting they were scared. One of them sighed.
"You know what? Forget it. Take this spot. I'm going home."
The fight deflated like a balloon with a slow leak. Down the street, a woman who'd been sick for months woke with a body that felt less like an enemy Her hands didn't shake when she reached for the lamp. She sat up without that crushing weight on her chest. She had no explanation. In a grocery aisle, two sisters who hadn't spoken in 10 years turned the same corner at the same time. Their carts rattled to a halt. They should have done what they always did. Look away, hurry past, but they didn't. They both burst into tears at once, laughing at the absurd timing through their sobs. They hugged, right there, between the cereal and the canned soup. The stranger saw these things without pride. He watched the small shifts in the fabric of the town, the way a mechanic might watch an engine start to turn over again, after years of sputtering. But each little miracle, each softened edge, each mended bond, seemed to confuse him almost as much as it healed the people around him. Because he didn't remember how he was doing any of it. He only knew he was supposed to.
He walked out towards the older part of town where the river cut under a narrow bridge. The ice there was patchy and hesitant, like still remembering the weeks it had been denied its usual freeze. And a familiar voice met him there, Mara Winters. Older now than when she'd first seen the barefoot boy on a creek that shouldn't have held ice. Different in ways she would notice. In how easily she took up space now, and how she didn't apologize to the sky when it failed to snow. She leaned on the bridge rail, watching the water. When she felt him beside her, she didn't startle.
You came late.
Oh, you remember me?
Not you exactly. The feeling. The pressure in the air before something strange shows up. And the way cold gets sharp around the edges. You're not the boy. But you feel like he did. Just bigger, heavier.
The man looked down at the river, the current tracing delicate patterns of half-formed ice along the banks. I fell. That part I remember. There was a call, not a voice, but many, 1,000 small fractures all humming the same note, and gestured aimlessly at the world. Someone was trying to hold winter back. Someone else was trapped in a day that wouldn't end. The ground was losing its grip. Houses were singing to people who didn't want to listen. And the season itself was unraveling. He pressed his hand to his chest. I came to help. But when I crossed over, I lost pieces of myself, my name, my purpose. But I've been remembering, just very slowly.
Mara watched him with the patient sympathy of someone who had once wished the universe would bend for her, and then learned what happened when it did. You're not here to fix everything for us.
No, that's not how it works. You fixed what I couldn't touch. Wishes, rituals, loops, breath. I'm here for something smaller, yet bigger all at once. He looked apologetic, like someone delivering news that might sting. I'm here because peace is heavier than people think. It slips, it gets misplaced. I'm a reminder, or I'm meant to be. If I could just remember all of it.
Mara smiled then, a little sadly, a little fondly. Maybe that's enough.
The storm rolled in 3 nights before Christmas. It wasn't like the others. This one felt disoriented, as if all the storms that hadn't happened on time that year had gotten lost and arrived together, this time too late and much too loud. Snow came hard and sideways, driven by a wind that howled down alleys and punched its fists against shutters. Power flickered. Roads vanished under drifts that grew by the minute. For the first time in a long time, people in Winter's Edge were afraid of winter in the old way. The way their great-grandparents had been, when a bad storm could mean you simply didn't make it through the night. In the middle of that chaos, the stranger moved. And this time, his body remembered faster than his mind.
He waded into the whiteout, coatless still, snow soaking his shirt and hair, yet somehow never weighing him down. He found a door frozen shut by a foot of drifted snow and ice. A young couple trapped inside with their newborn. The man on the other side had bruised his shoulder trying to ram it open. The stranger placed both hands flat against the wood. He didn't shove. He didn't shout. He simply breathed out, long and slow, a breath that seemed to carry warmth from somewhere beyond flesh and lungs. The ice softened and the door moved, and he stepped back as it swung open, the father stumbling out, gratitude pouring from him in a rush of words the stranger barely seemed able to take in.
Next, he found an old sedan half buried in a plowed-in ridge of snow. Engine dead, exhaust pipe blocked. 2 teenagers were inside, trying very hard not to panic. He yanked the door open, hauled them out one by one, and walked them through wind so vicious that they could barely stand. His steady pace carving a path they could follow back toward the glow of distant windows. With each act, it took something from him. With every life he nudged toward safety, his steps grew a little heavier. His hands shook a little more when he reached for the next frozen latch, the next shoulder in the dark. But he didn't stop. This was the part he understood best. Motion toward the danger, guiding people back out of it. If there was one piece of himself that remained sharp, it was that.
By the time the night was almost over, he found himself staggering toward the edge of the forest, the same woods where Lena had once found Winter's failing heartbeat. Snow swirled around him in dizzy spirals. The air sounded muffled like cotton stuffed in his ears. He sank to his knees. For the first time since his arrival, he felt cold, real cold, the kind that reached bone. He smiled, oddly relieved.
Ah, there you are.
A small figure struggled toward him through the drifts. Lena Marin. Older than the last time we saw her, but not by much. Just enough to carry her confidence differently. The girl who once stepped inside December's ribcage now moved like someone who knew the season personally. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands already reaching to brush snow from his hair, his shoulders, his face. Hey, gotta stay with me. You can't fall asleep. That's what they always say in the stories, right? Don't let them fall asleep in the snow.
Stories get some things right.
His eyes met hers, full of gratitude that went beyond the moment.
You're the one who helped Winter breathe again.
You know about that?
I felt it. Every time you listened to something the world tried to ignore, you made a path for me without knowing. All of you did. Mara, Nina, Rowan. You each loosened knots in the season until I could finally reach you. He winced, pressing a hand to his chest. I remembered more as I walked. Enough to know I don't stay. That's not what I'm here for.
Then what are you for?
He lifted a hand, fingers shaking, and touched the center of her chest. Not in a romantic gesture, not in ownership, but like someone tapping a locked door gently to remind the person inside that they have the key. Peace lives here, not in the sky, not in miracles, not in someone descending from above to fix what hurts. His hand stayed where it was, palm warm against her coat despite the storm. You carry it, even when you forget, even when the world howls and memory claws and winter feels like a weight instead of a blanket. Your peace is the one gift you keep misplacing. He smiled faintly, but you never really lost it.
Lena's eyes blurred. Not because the wind stung them, but because the words slid into a place inside her that had felt empty and turned out to be a door. With each word, the storm around them shifted. The wind lost its fury. Snowflakes began to fall straight down, no longer whipped sideways. The world's edges softened. Light, not from above, not from any candle or street lamp, gathered around the man. Not golden and not blinding. Pale, soft like the light that comes just after a heavy snowfall, when everything sounds quieter, as if the world is holding its breath in gentle awe. For a heartbeat, wings flickered into view behind him. They were not feathered. They were patterns. Curving lines of frost, intricate branching maps like the ones Mara had seen on the creek, like the shapes Lena had traced in the roots beneath the clearing, like the hum lines Lena had felt in her walls. Memory made visible. Geometry of mercy. They unfolded once, not in grandeur, but in relief.
Oh, there you are. I remember now.
He looked lighter, even as his body sagged. Whatever name he had once carried in a place beyond this valley didn't come back in letters or sound. It came back in knowing. He was not here to be worshipped. He was here to remind, to bend briefly closer to a world that kept forgetting that every season outside mirrored a season within. He exhaled one last time. The light around him scattered into the falling snow, not vanishing, but joining it. He didn't explode into glory, and he didn't rise. He simply dissolved into flakes, into frost, into the soft crystalline dust that settled over Lena's coat and lashes, over the trees, over the path back toward town. Winter received him like a missing note, folding back into a song.
Morning arrived clear and sharp. The sky washed in a pale blue that looked almost fragile after the night's violence. People in Winter's Edge remembered the storm. They remembered being scared and doors rattling, power flickering. They did not remember the man with no coat who had opened doors and pulled cars from drifts and guided them by the sound of their own breath. But many of them woke with a strange, quiet feeling, as if something inside them had put down a heavy bag in the middle of the night. They couldn't say why. They just knew that for the first time in a long while, the day ahead did not feel like a fight waiting to happen.
Bellwether Church's bells rang for Christmas morning, their tone truer now, less hollow. The air around the steeple felt aligned. Mara arrived first, brushing snow from her coat as she stepped into the old building. She hadn't planned on attending a service. She'd simply felt drawn, the way she used to feel drawn to the sky when winter refused to come. Nina slipped in next, fingers still ink-smudged from journaling late into the night. Calder House had hummed softly at dawn, a contented, resting sound, and she'd taken it as permission to go. Rowan came in last, clutching a folded photograph in one hand. She wasn't sure if she believed in ritual anymore, but she believed in showing up for herself, and this seemed as good a place as any to practice. Lena sat near the middle, hands wrapped around a candle she hadn't lit yet, eyes still a little red from the storm and what she'd witnessed at the forest's edge. They didn't know each other, not by name, not yet. But as the bells finished their final peal and the murmur of the congregation settled, each of them glanced up at the same moment, as if some shared chord had been plucked deep inside 4 different chests. Their eyes met across the pews. Something like recognition flickered there. Not the "we've met at the grocery store" kind. The deeper kind that says, "You changed the world a little, didn't you?" Me too.
Outside, the snow drifted down in slow, lazy spirals, unhurried now, unconcerned with deadlines or delays. The winter that had once refused to arrive had finally settled in, not as punishment or weight, but as a blanket, a season meant for rest, reflection, and quiet repair. Somewhere beyond the steeple, on a hill just out of sight, a barefoot figure stood watching the town. Younger than the man who dissolved into the storm, and yet somehow linked to him, the way a memory links to the moment that birthed it. He tilted his head, listening. The valley's thin places hummed softly, no longer gasping. The house on Ashmere Lane slept without shaking. Cloudmere moved forward at last, and the clearing in the woods held its roots steady. The boy smiled, brief but satisfied, then turned and walked into the brightness of the snow, his outline fading into the landscape until he was just another ripple in the unseen winter.
In that valley, winter would come late again someday. Storms would arrive too early or too hard. People would forget the lessons they'd learned. They always do. But somewhere in the pattern of frost on a window, in the hum of an old house, in the hush before a storm, peace would still be there, waiting to be remembered. Not out there, not falling from the sky. Inside, where all seasons begin.
Thank you for joining us for The Unseen Winter. Do you hear what I hear in the quiet of winter? May your own season find its breath, and may your peace be easier to remember than it is to misplace. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.